I'm Theron Ramacharaka. This video is important. I don't know how long it's going to be. I haven't written a script for it. I know what I want to say. And I have good source material here to support me. But I don't know how long it's going to be. You must persevere through it. And like I said, I don't have a script written for it. So therefore, I may fumble a bit. It doesn't mean I'm uncertain. It just means I don't have my thoughts well organized up front. This has to do with totalitarian control, totalitarianism, world domination by a few, elite, and the New World Order. Some still argue, sometimes with me, nicely, but with me, that there is no small elite group of people trying to take over the world. That there's no such thing, or that it cannot happen. Well, I just assert that such a person either doesn't want to face the facts or hasn't looked into them enough. Excuse me. That all notwithstanding, I just wanted to point out that there are some people who need to hear this. All right. There are many tools used. One is control over media, entertainment, law, religion, all the social institutions, major social institutions, public education, and so forth. Putting people, in large, drawing them from the upper ranks of secret societies and placing them into influential and authoritative positions in the world, especially, at least, in Western civilization. And there are various factions that do have battles with one another over who's going to ultimately be in charge. And there's an American version of all of this. It is, in large, centered in the order of Skull and Bones. At least, it has been for some while. Some call that the American Illuminati. Now, there was an original Illuminati, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a modern day thing here going on, and the American side of it is in large the order called the Order of Skull and Bones, and it is headquartered at Yale University. Now, I want to get right to some supporting stuff here, but first, I want to talk about one of the main methods used, in addition to most of these same people, you know, the elite, so forth. I've talked about many times here in various different videos about their associations with entities, lower astral entities, and coming under the influence of those entities, and perhaps reptilian influence, and so forth, you know, through bloodline families, etc., you know, royal families, and whatnot, okay? Okay, entities, all right? And also, you know, their engagement in child ritual abuse, satanic ritual abuse, and so forth. Another main tool is setting things up so that people police each other and enforce agendas unknowingly, unwittingly. There are some other main methods that are employed, such as following the occult practices set up by Solomon, not King Solomon of the Bible, but a medievalist named Solomon in his what are called the Lesser Keys of Solomon. There were two main writings of his, the Greater Keys of Solomon and the Lesser Keys of Solomon. The Lesser Keys are also called the Goetia, and it largely focuses on the invocations and evocations of lower astral entities. That got combined with the magical practices of Aleister Crowley, because he became a threat to them for a little while, because his magic was very powerful, his dark arts were very powerful, and once he passed, they adopted his methods and combined them with what they were already using from the Goetia. All right. Another main tool, the one that I want to emphasize here and bring to your awareness, if you haven't heard of it yet, is called the Hegelian Dialectic. Hegelian, referring to the German philosopher Hegel, the phenomenologist Hegel. All right. Excuse me. You've heard of divide and conquer. A house divided amongst itself cannot stand. Divide and conquer. Put people at odds with one another, and then they're easily controlled. All right. A house divided amongst itself cannot stand. Maybe that's why in our House of Representatives, which is divided, Republican and Democrat, two sides of the aisle, maybe that's why they're sitting all the time. I don't know, because they cannot stand. No, that's just a bad joke. All right. The Hegelian dialectic is a sophisticated method to divide and conquer. And it has been called by other names. It has other terms than Hegel's terms have been used. Hegel's terms about the mechanics of how it works were synthesis, antithesis, and thesis, thesis, antithesis or antithesis, and synthesis or synthesis. And he said that by using these three phases, history can be guided toward the ultimate condition, political and economic condition of the ideal state, which is total control over the people. And this method is being used and employed very widely and very deeply by those powers that be, as we sometimes put it, these same individuals that I'm referring to by pointing to these other main methods used. This is one of their main tools, using the Hegelian dialectic in conjunction with these other things that I have mentioned and more things, okay? All right, the Hegelian dialectic, in short, is the same small group of people creating a thesis or a position, which is promoted through these different channels: education, politics, media, entertainment, and so forth, all right? A position. Let's say, whatever, like the left, the political left, and it's some agenda of it, okay? Then the same group of people create an opposing view and propose it, but don't say, hey, it's all us all along here, creating both sides. That's called the antithesis, the other side of the coin. Same coin. Two heads of the same monster, two sides of the same coin. All right? So there's an idea with all of its actions and so forth, and then there's the counter idea with all of its actions, but they're both created by the same group of people who have an agenda. And neither one of these sides, the thesis or the antithesis, are the goal. The synthesis is the goal. The coming together of those two sides, the resolution. And it is guided. It is manipulated to come about that way. And then that synthesis becomes a new thesis. And the process continues, pushing toward kind of like a planned out, but also due to variables that pop up, resistance, things going another direction, without them having intended it to, society taking another turn. Well, it's kind of like a make it up planned thing together as you go. But the goal is totalitarianism. New world order, one world government, one world economics, one world religion. The three faces of the New World Order. Which involves total consciousness hijacking, perception deception, and transhumanist agenda, the whole bit. Okay? All right. Now, other people call it by other things. There's a man, David Icke, who talks about it, but he uses more pedestrian terms than thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. But he will say it's the Hegelian dialectic. Now, I want to talk more about it, because if you are one of those who hasn't heard of it yet, you need to hear of it. If you have heard of it and you reject the idea, you deny it, then you need to hear this. All right, look, I've done a lot of looking into this. Don't think I'm new to this. Don't even propose it in a comment. Well, of course, I always have more to learn. But if you're going to try to tell me something that you think I don't know, be careful. I'm not new to this. All right? All right, so let's just take one source. America's Secret Establishment, An Introduction to the Order of Skull and Bones by Anthony Sutton. Like I said, I don't know how long this is going to go, but bear with it, okay? This is 2002. Anthony Sutton. It's a well-researched book. Very well-researched. He's at Stanford University. All right, so anyway, I just want to show you a little bit more about the book so that you understand that this is well-researched, okay, and well-documented material. In the introductory part of the contents, is there a conspiracy explanation for recent history? These are memorandums. How much is known about the order? Who is in this secret society? What organizations has it penetrated? Operations of the order, how the order relates to the trilaterals, the chain of influence, how it works, the Bundy operation, and then we get to how the order controls education. It all began at Yale. The Illuminati connection, the Leipzig connection, the Baltimore scheme, the Troika spreads its wings, the order's objective for education. Then it branches off into how the order creates war and revolution. And I'm going to read some excerpts from that because it defines the Hegelian dialectic and how it is used. Created conflict and the dialectic process, operational vehicles for conflict creation, thesis, the order creates the Soviet Union, antithesis, financing the Nazis. What do you think so far? Angola and China, the new dialectic, the secret cult of the order, introduction to the cult of the order, organization of the order, rituals of the order, satanic aspects of the order. Is the order also Illuminati? And then many reprints of rare materials on the order. Item number 1, Anonymous Skull and Bones. Item number 2, Anonymous Skull, The Fall of Skull and Bones. Item number 3, The Iconoclast. 4 years at Yale, Secret Societies. And so on. Okay, now look. I want to show you some of the material in here. Some of the documents. Original order documents. Copies of them. There are many diagrams in here. Reprints of documents from the order. Memorandums, notes from the order. Here, more. Right, these are original materials here. more. Time-stamped, dated. On and on it goes. On and on it goes. Memorandum number 4, antithesis financing the Nazis. Here's some document. Here's a document relating to that. It keeps on going and going and going and going. All very well researched and written. Okay? They've got lists of names, Yale University commencement and reunion calendars, who were involved, who were there, lists of names, the Bush family's involvements, on and on and on. Living members, October 1983, living members, where they're working, what they're doing, official documents, again, all right. This just keeps going and going and going. Order of the Filing Claw. Here's their headquarters, Skull and Bones Temple at Yale, called the Mausoleum. All right, let's go back to the Hegelian dialectic. I'm just going to pick and choose here quickly. Created conflict and the dialectic process. Our first hypothesis that the U.S. was ruled by an elite secret society was supported by documentary evidence. Such a secret society does exist. Its membership is concealed, and disclosure of membership is not a voluntary effort. We also argued that in our first volume that the operations of the order must be seen and explained in terms of the Hegelian dialectic process. Their operations cannot be explained in terms of any other philosophy. Therefore, the order cannot be described as left or right, secular or religious, Marxist or capitalist. The order and its objectives is all of those and none of those. In Hegelian philosophy, the conflict of political right and political left, or thesis and antithesis in Hegelian terms, is essential to the forward movement of history and historical change itself, according to Hegel. Conflict between thesis and antithesis bring about a synthesis, in other words, a new historical situation. Our descriptive world history in the West and Marxist countries consists only of a description of an analysis within a political framework of right or left. For example, historical work published in the West looks at communism and socialism either through the eyes of financial capitalism or Marxism. Historical work published in the Soviet Union looks at the West only through Marxist eyes. However, there is another frame for historical analysis that has never, so far as we can determine, been utilized to use a framework of Hegelian logic to determine if those elites who control the state use the dialectic process to create a predetermined historical synthesis. Only tantalizing glimpses of any such creative process can be found in modern historical works, blah, blah, blah. However, they are going to point out discovered material here. Who or what is the power? How is it used? Blah, blah, blah. There's the Trilateral Commission, who's very big involved in this. All right. Finally, we will tie these decisions and operations back to the elite and specifically to the order. Main point number 2, how the dialectic process works. Throughout the last 200 years, since the rise of Kant in German philosophy, we can identify two conflicting systems of philosophy and so opposing ideas of the state, society, and culture. In the U.S., the British Commonwealth, and France, philosophy is based on the individual and the rights of the individual. Whereas in Germany, from the time of Kant through Fichte and Hegel up to 1945, the root philosophy has been universal brotherhood, rejection of individualism, and general opposition to Western classical liberal thought in almost all its aspects. German idealism, as we've noted in earlier volumes of this series, was the philosophical basis for the work of Karl Marx and the left Hegelians, as well as Bismarck, Hitler, and the right Hegelians. This is the paradox, that Hegel gave a theoretical basis not only to the most conservative of German movements, but also to most of the revolutionary movements of the 19th century. Both Marx and Hitler have their philosophical roots in Hegel. From the Hegelian system of political thought, alien to most of us in the West, stem such absurdities as the state seen as the march of God through history, that the state is also God, that the only duty of a citizen is to serve God by serving the state, and that the state is absolute reason, that a citizen can only find freedom by worship and utter obedience to the state. However, we also noted in How the Order Controls Education, the earlier part of the book, that Hegelian absurdities have thoroughly penetrated the United States educational system under pressure from such organizations as the National Education Association and major foundations. From this system of Hegelian philosophy comes the historical dialectic, that is, that all historical events emerge from a conflict between opposing forces. These emerging events are above and different from the conflicting events. Any idea or implementation of an idea may be seen as thesis. This thesis will encourage emergence of opposing forces, known as antithesis. The final outcome will be neither thesis nor antithesis, but a synthesis of the two forces in conflict. Karl Marx, in Das Kapital, posed capitalism as thesis and communism as antithesis. What has been completely ignored by historians, including Marxists, is that any clash between these forces cannot lead to a society which is either capitalist or communist, but must lead to a society characterized by a synthesis of these two conflicting forces. The clash of opposites must, in the Hegelian system, bring about a society neither capitalist nor communist. Moreover, in the Hegelian scheme of events, this new synthesis will reflect the concept of the state as God and the individual as totally subordinate to an all-powerful state. What then is the function of a parliament or a congress for Hegelians? These institutions are merely to allow individuals to feel that their opinions have some value and to allow a government to take advantage of whatever wisdom the so-called peasant may accidentally demonstrate. As Hegel puts it, by virtue of this participation, subjective liberty and conceit, with their general opinion, individuals can show themselves palpably efficacious and enjoy the satisfaction of feeling themselves to account for something. End quote. War, the organized conflict of nations for Hegelians, is only the visible outcome of the clash between ideas. As John Dewey, the Hegelian darling of the modern educational system, puts it, war is the most effective preacher of the vanity of all merely finite interests. It puts an end to the selfish egoism of the individual by which he would claim his life and his property as his own or as his family's. Well, war serves other purposes for these people. If we go over to the satanic side, it produces huge gobs of the most negative emotions and feeds lower astral entities with it. We've talked about that elsewhere. Here on my channel. That's another side to this. So with all of these tools here, many birds are being killed with one stone, so to speak. We're just talking about one aspect of things here. All right? Of course, this war-promoting Dewey paragraph is conveniently forgotten by the National Education Association, which is today busy in the peace movement at precisely that time when a peace movement most aids the Hegelian Soviets. Above all, the Hegelian doctrine is the divine right of states, rather than the divine right of kings. The state for Hegel and Hegelians is God on earth. The march of God in history is the cause of the existence of states. Their foundation is the power of reason realizing itself as will. Every state, whatever it be, participates in this divine essence. The state is not the work of human art, only reason could produce it. That's from the philosophy of right. For Hegel, the individual is nothing. The individual has no rights. Morality consists solely in following a leader. For the ambitious individual, the rule is Senator Mansfield's maxim: to get along, you have to go along. Compare to this the spirit and letter of the Constitution of the United States. We, the people, grant the state some powers and reserve all others to the people. Separation of church and state is built into the United States Constitution, a denial of Hegel's "the state is God on earth." Yet, compare this legal requirement to the actions of the order in the United States, the group in England, the Illuminati in Germany, and the Politburo in Russia. For these elitists, the state is supreme, and a self-appointed elite running the state acts indeed as God on earth. Main point number 3, J.P. Morgan uses the dialectic process. I'm not going to read all that. Quite a lengthy bit on that. Quite a lengthy bit. The creation of war and revolution. This manipulation of left and right on the domestic front is duplicated in the international field, where left and right political structures are artificially constructed and collapsed in the drive for a one-world synthesis. College textbooks present war and revolution as more or less accidental results of conflicting forces. The decay of political negotiation into physical conflict comes about, according to these books, after valiant efforts to avoid war. Unfortunately, this is nonsense. War is always a deliberate creative act by individuals. Western textbooks also have gigantic gaps. For example, after World War II, the tribunals set up to investigate Nazi war criminals were careful to censor any materials recording Western assistance to Hitler. By the same token, Western textbooks on Soviet economic development omit any description of the economic and financial aid given to the 1917 revolution and the subsequent economic development by Western firms and banks. Revolution is always recorded as a spontaneous event by the politically or economically deprived against an autocratic state. Never in Western textbooks will you find the evidence that revolutions need finance, and the source of finance in many cases traces back to Wall Street. Consequently, it can be argued that our Western history is every bit as distorted, censored, and largely useless as that of Hitler's Germany or the Soviet Union or Communist China. No Western foundation will award grants to investigate such topics. Few Western academics can survive, so to speak, by researching such theses. And certainly no major publisher can easily accept manuscripts reflecting such arguments. In fact, there is another largely unrecorded history, and it tells a story quite different than our sanitized textbooks. It tells the story of the deliberate creation of war, the knowing finance of revolution to change governments, and the use of conflict to create a new world order. In Memorandum 5, we will explore the continuation of this dialectic conflict into the last 2 decades, specifically Angola and China today. We will show that the purpose of the order is to create a new synthesis, a new world order along Hegelian lines, where the state is absolute and the individual can find freedom only in blind obedience to the state. That may be more than you've heard anywhere else on YouTube about the Hegelian dialectic and the order of skull and bones, sometimes referred to as the American side of the Illuminati. If you don't believe any of this happens, you're wrong. If you don't believe such a march in this direction is not possible, you're wrong. I'm Theron Ramacharaka. Be well.